Good afternoon and welcome to Volunteering Victoria's webinar series. I'm Sarah Sterling, our Sector Development Manager, and I'm pleased to be bringing you these webinars on what should be a monthly basis, talking about talking to volunteers and volunteer managers about their experience related to themes of volunteer management. Before we go on any further, I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land which we call Australia. Though we're likely logging on from different parts of Australia, I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future from traditional custodians across the country. I've just a few housekeeping notes before I introduce our two guests. In the interest of all other listeners, please keep yourself on mute throughout the webinar. You should have all arrived on mute, but you should be able to check down the bottom by hovering your mouse over the screen. There's a public chat box which will send messages or hellos to all participants. Feel free to introduce yourselves, but if you have a question, we'd ask that you submit it through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you're having technical troubles, please either use the public chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll try and assist you with the technology. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guests, Lana Bedford and Julian Ainsley, who will be chatting with me today about their journeys. So Lana Bedford is the manager of Duke Street Community House in Sunshine and has extensive experience in social work and management roles in the community services sector. Lana has a strong commitment to community development principles and disability inclusion, which informs all of her work at Duke Street. She manages a team of volunteers that includes several people living with disability, and she's passionate about promoting disability inclusion in volunteering. Julene is extremely active in volunteering in her community, including positions on the Advisory Committee of Syndham Neighbourhood House and the Duke Street Community House Management Committee, which includes a 2-year period holding the position of Vice Chairperson. She also works on governance programs through the Brimbank City Council for people who want to set up their own community group. Living with an acquired brain injury has had its challenges, but hasn't stopped Julene leading by example by being on the board of management for Duke Street, which she believes is a great demonstration of her abilities, of the abilities of people with disabilities. She's also recently been appointed the volunteer coordinator at Duke Street Community House, so I'm sure we'll be able to provide lots of insight with both her volunteer and volunteer coordinator hat on. So welcome, Julene and Lana, and thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So nice. It's great to be here.
So we'll kick off with the first question from Julene. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Duke Street?
I'm a mother of 4 children. I have 20 grandchildren. For many years, I was a lost person. I felt I just didn't seem to fit in anywhere. I was struggling with daily living, trying to bring up 4 young children. It was hard. In 1996, I was diagnosed with an ABI, which gave me a name to what was wrong with me, but not much more than that. I didn't know what it meant as it was not explained to me. Because I was still having problems with forming routines and strategies, I was referred to other services like ISIS Primary Care and case managed by them. I started to get support workers, and it was their boss, Joanne, who got me involved with Duke Street Community House back in 2003. I started there in a computer course. I found it difficult at first, but hung in there. I worked my way through basic computers to advanced computers and other courses in between.
Oh, that sounds like a good place to start at a community house. So how about you, Lana? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Duke Street?
Yeah, so I've been the manager of Duke Street for nearly 4 years now. I'm a social worker, and my main areas of expertise have been family violence, age and disability, education and the community sectors. My story, and this I think is why I'm really passionate about volunteering, is that I became involved with Duke Street about 18 years ago when I first qualified as a social worker, and I volunteered in a family violence program, and it really changed my life, doing that volunteer role. So not only did it lead on to employment, but volunteering at Duke Street, I've come full circle, and here I am 18 years later managing the organisation.
Such a common story.
Yeah,
People get involved and can't stop.
I know, and I always say the neighbourhood house sector has ruined me for all other organisations. I just love working in it. So Duke Street is a neighbourhood house, and we do lots of programs out of a very small little weatherboard house. So we do a lot of adult education programs. So we teach English, or like Julene was talking about, computer classes. We've got occasional childcare. We do a lot of community events and celebrations, health and wellbeing programs, and we do social research and a lot of community development programs. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. You also forgot the leadership program, the couple of leadership
Yes.
programs you did.
Yeah, so obviously building community capacity is just a really key theme in the work that we do. I know you were involved in some of those leadership programs.
Yes, I was.
And see where it's led.
See where it's led, indeed.
Yeah.
It can often be, from what I know of community houses, it's probably easier to list the things you don't do than to list the things that you do in one line.
And sometimes I just think with the small amount of funding we get, how we're able to achieve what we achieve is really through the commitment of our paid and unpaid staff, because our volunteers, we have more volunteers in the organisation than paid staff. So it really helps us to achieve wonderful things for our community that we wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve.
They're a great resource. So I'll throw back to you, Julene, and just ask, how did you start volunteering at Duke Street?
Excuse me. It was about 2012. This is a real funny story. I got collared by both Bronwyn and Anthony at the time. And I mean, it sounds wrong saying it this way, but Bronwyn come out from her office and sort of met me in the middle of the kitchen area, and Anthony come up from the other end of the house and met me at the kitchen area. They both said at the same time, "We've got the wonderful position for you that we think that you might be interested in." I looked at them and said, "What have I done wrong?" That was my first thought. And then they said, no, you haven't done anything wrong. We'd like you to, or we think you'd be interested in joining our committee. Well, I suppose I shouldn't say this, but my first remark to them was, no, why would you like a dumb bum like me? I don't know anything. But I proved myself wrong. I went to the first meeting, I enjoyed it, and have been going ever since. And as you heard in the introduction, I was on the committee of management for 2 years as a vice chairperson, and it was such a learning curve for me. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm now back as a committee member, and I'm still enjoying it.
That's fantastic. It's really nice when you have those moments where you can prove yourself wrong, and I think volunteering is a great way to do that. So we'll throw back to you, Lana. How did you get involved with volunteer management at Duke Street?
Yeah, well, it's an integral part of the role. Like I said before, we've got more volunteers than paid staff. So, and I think the other thing is that I really am very passionate about it. So I've got my own personal experience of volunteering, but I feel very passionate that our workforce should, paid and unpaid workforce should reflect our community, the diversity of our community. So it's a passion for me. It's a labour of love. one of the challenges I do face is I'm employed for 30 hours a week. And as you can imagine, that means I'm spread pretty thin. So it is, I always feel that I never quite give my volunteers as much time and love as I would like to, but it's part of the sector and we all do the best we can with the resources we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thinking a little bit about your experience now, Jolene, I wanted to ask you, what challenges have you faced as a volunteer with a disability?
Well, from Duke Street, I haven't faced many challenges because they were all aware that I had a disability. And I mean, in saying that, being at Duke Street, I found it was like a second home to me. They're so warm, so friendly, and they're just incredible. And if I've had any problems, they've been able to help me with them and everything else. Whereas I went to Sydenham, and I found Sydenham's, yes, they're friendly, but they don't have that warmth about them.
So there's a little bit of a difference in culture around
Yes.
welcoming.
Very much so. But I mean, the ladies there, they are nice, but I think, unfortunately,
We
I prefer-
captured your heart.
I was
Yes.
going to say, your heart and your loyalty with Duke Street. You sold for life, I think.
Like me, happened to me too.
Yeah, well, you know, when you're onto a good thing. So I guess turning to you, Lana, have there been any specific challenges that as a manager you faced when supporting Jolene to undertake her volunteer duties?
So, I mean, I wouldn't term it as being challenges. It's in a lot of ways, walking beside Jolene as she's been on this journey has been a real privilege. Just to see her confidence grow and her abilities grow over the years has been amazing. But, you know, I just support Jolene the way I support any of my staff. And I think that's really important to know, that there's no difference. Because Jolene lives with a disability doesn't mean I treat her or manage her any other way, any way that's different. What I do with all of my staff is I find out what their strengths are and what their development needs are, and I try and work from a strengths-based process, trying to get that word out. Thank you, Jolene, see? And I think that really getting to know Jolene and what she's most interested in and what she most wants to do and how she wants to develop means that I can actually design tasks that she will really enjoy. So wherever possible, I try and develop tasks that are specific to the volunteer, which is sometimes hard because I don't have a lot of time up my sleeve, but when I can, I do. And I suppose the other thing that we acknowledge is sometimes because of Jolene's condition, she can't attend regularly. So there might be times where she might have appointments or she might be feeling unwell or for whatever reason. So one of the things that we do is we actually, I allocate her work that's important but not urgent. So it doesn't have that time critical factor. So when Jolene can come into Duke Street to do her volunteer work, the work is there sitting, waiting for her, but I'm not at the other end yelling, I need it by tomorrow. There's enough time allocated. So that's some of the things that we've done. Also acknowledging that through every day, with every person you deal with, there'll be good and bad days. So I remember one really funny story. I hope you're okay if I share this, but one day I asked Jolene to send a letter. Do you remember this? Jolene sent a letter but forgot to write the name of the person and address on the envelope. And when that was returned to us via return email, we laughed a lot because it was just a silly error that anyone could make. But if you're not in the right headspace, or if you don't think you know, being inclusive is important, you could use that as an excuse not to include people in your volunteering program. So, but it was a good laugh for us at the time.
Absolutely. Sounds like
we've all done things like that.
We all have. I do them on a daily basis, I think. So throwing back to you, Julene, are there specific things that help you know, like, how do you know you'll be welcomed by an organisation? And how have you been welcomed, particularly by Duke Street?
Everyone was warm and friendly and welcoming. As I said, it felt like a second home to me. When it came to specific things that were needed to volunteer, like working with children checks and police checks, Bronwyn helped me with all the forms needed for volunteering. So everybody, all the staff members do go above and beyond and will help where you need help. And they really do not look down at you and say, oh, you know, why should we bother with this? They're very open about it. And I know in my case, there were a couple of things that wording in some things I didn't understand. So I had to ask, you know, a couple of times what it meant and could they give it to me. And I said to them, I know it's the wrong wording at the time. I said to them, could they dumb it down for me? But it was, I've since learned that it's
plain English. That's what it's called.
Easy
English. That's right.
But yeah, no, they go above and beyond in helping anybody with a disability, and you are felt welcome there. You know, they make you really feel like a family rather than just a specific person. You know, that for me, that really helps me.
Oh, that's great. So how about you, Lana? Are there specific things that you have done at Duke Street to kind of make people welcome at Duke Street?
Yeah, I think for me, it's I think strong leadership in the area is a really important starting point, and that for me, I'm always talking about it with my staff around why inclusion of all different shapes and sizes is important to us as an organisation. So I think you can have all the policies and procedures you like, but if the leadership of the organisation isn't walking the walk, then it's not going to work. I think it's really interesting for me to reflect a bit on this question, because Duke Street is, I think, the 1930s or 1950s weatherboard house. So it's not very physically accessible, and our reception area can be really difficult for people in scooters and wheelchairs. But we've spoken to people about that experience, and they say despite the physical challenges, if when they get through that door, there is warmth, there is greetings, there is empathy, there is understanding, then that overcomes the physical barriers that are there. So it goes to show how important how we treat each other is, basically. And I think the other thing is that policies and procedures, I think, are really important, but they're more important as learning tools for me. They're ways that you can actually teach staff about how the organisation wants to approach and be accessible. And at the moment, we're updating all of those and also updating our position descriptions. I want it to be really clear that we're a very accessible, inclusive organisation. So when someone reads a position description, they think, yes, I could apply for that, and that organisation will be welcoming for me.
Wonderful. And yeah, position descriptions, sometimes web forms, they're often the first thing people see about your organisation. So it's important that if you're not physically at the door to say that you're welcoming, that your forms look just as welcoming as your organisation is in person.
Yeah, yeah.
So to go back to you, Julene, the experience that you had feeling welcomed by the organisation, particularly Duke Street, how is that different to other organisations or situations that you might have faced? It sounds like you've been very lucky at the start of your volunteering with them.
I was very lucky. When I first went to Duke Street, as I said, it was very warm, very friendly, and I was lucky to have that experience first up. And I just never wanted to leave. I've been there since 2003, and it's 2019 now, so I've been there 16 years doing courses, doing the volunteering and on the committee, and then a couple of months ago getting the position of volunteer coordinator. And I feel privileged in having such wonderful people guide me along the way. It's been such a learning journey for me. But out of all of that, I've had one very funny experience. Lana said to me that there wasn't some computer courses going at Duke Street, and she suggested I try going to another neighbourhood house. And I went to do the computer courses there, but there was a bit of a, the first time I went, there was a bit of a hold up, so it got delayed. Then it eventually went through. But after doing the course, I went back to Lana and said, Lana, this might sound silly to you. I said, but I felt like a traitor leaving Duke Street. And Lana's comment was, no, you're not being a traitor, don't feel that way. But it was just how I felt. It was just, I felt horrible not doing the work at Duke Street because the staff are so friendly and so warm. But also in saying that, the staff have been really good to me at Duke Street, and I've had supportive roles and environment, and I've had other opportunities, and have got involved with Victoria Alive and volunteering Victoria, and through Voice at the Table, I was given the opportunity to be on
the program advisory committee.
Yes.
Group.
Yes. And I thought, when I heard that little spiel, it was like, oh, sorry. I wanted to do it, so I pushed my boundaries, said yes, I'm going to go for it. I got helped with the form to fill out, and it was sent off, and I ended up being selected for the position, and I went on leaps and bounds with that, and unfortunately now it's finished, and I'm really sorry that it's finished, because I was really starting to learn things from it all. But I mean, really, if you do have a disability, don't let that stop you. You know, there are people out there, there are organisations out there that do want to take you on board. So, you know, I would, say go for it.
Yeah, you can surprise yourself with what you end up being able to do, can't you?
Can I pick up on your point, Julene, when you were talking about how you felt disloyal? You didn't want to go and spread your wings or go to another organisation. And I think our conversation at that time was really about, but that's a success for me. If someone I've supported in a volunteer capacity feels confident enough to move on to the next challenge, that's a success. So I remember us talking about that, and it's like anything, when anyone in your organisation leaves, there's loss because you've lost great skills, but you feel really happy for them because they're moving on to their next challenge as well. So that's a lot of what we try and do at Duke Street, is to move people on to the next challenge.
No, it's brilliant. So you guys have obviously worked pretty closely together over the time, and probably learned a heck of a lot about each other that you maybe didn't know when you started. So I'm going to ask, what did you learn about each other over time? And I'll ask you, Julie, first. What have you learned about Lana?
I've learned a lot from Lana, and I've always looked up to Lana in the past, and really I found Lana to be a very strong person, very confident person, loyal to her beliefs, and also she's a very fair and just person. And the thing I really like about Lana is that she's honest, and she's very passionate about what she what she does, and she's a very genuine person.
Oh, I know. Thank you, Julie.
That's the truth. It really is how I feel about you.
Thank you.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Before we all start crying,
I know.
I'll ask you, Lana, what have you learnt about Jolene over time?
Well, Jolene is someone who has amazing skills and talents, and one of my major challenges is that is to try and get her to recognise that. So I'm always talking to Jolene about the value she has and the skills she has, and what a brave, inspiring person she is. It's been, it's just been a real privilege to walk alongside her. And the other thing is, it's been really interesting reflecting on this topic today, because myself personally, I suffered quite a severe back injury, and I've been quite unwell for the last 6 months. And I know, first off, it was interesting to see how the organisation, so my committee, treated me as I've been going through this time, but also it's been enormously helpful for me to talk to Jolene a bit about her lived experiences of having similar issues, and really supporting each other as peers through this, quite a difficult human experience of chronic pain and not being able, and the frustration of not being able to do everything you would like to do. Your body's stopping you from doing that. So we've learned a lot, and even recently have become even more closer through this shared experience, I think. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I'll throw it back to you, Jolene. What would make you want to continue in a volunteer role in an organisation, or what might stop you from being involved as a volunteer?
Being passionate about volunteer work and the community makes me want to continue volunteering. I've had such great experience with Duke Street that I'd feel a bit funny being involved somewhere else. And I know Lana's spoken about that, but it's just the way I feel that I'm loyal. I'm very loyal to Duke Street. But it's how I feel, and they've been so supportive, and the trust that's been built, and the relationship that's been built around there. That's why I sort of stayed there. But for me, a challenge that would make me, or something that would make me stop, is if I don't have that supportive relationships with people, and the trust is not built there. That would make me stop. But another thing that would be, I try not to let it stop me, but working in an environment where there's more males, the majority is males rather than females, I'd be very uncomfortable in working that kind of atmosphere. So that might be a challenge for me, but as I said, I try not to let it stop me.
Yeah, from what I've seen, Julian, you're pretty good at pushing your boundaries. I'll throw to you, Lana. What's one suggestion that you might have for other volunteer managers to be more inclusive and accessible for people with disability?
Can I only give one, or can I give a couple?
You can give as many as you like, Lana.
I think my main tips is just to try and think outside the square. And really, I know as organisations, we probably have volunteer role descriptions, but if someone comes to you and they live with a disability and they've got an awesome skills and abilities, you would be silly to send that away if they can't fit into that square. So try and adapt your volunteer roles if at all possible. Can it be done from home? Is there project work? What are the sorts of things that these people could add value to your organisation in? I think providing ongoing feedback, especially so people have foundations to take on new challenges, is really important. I think even for myself with my current injury, it takes, not only does it take away from your physical abilities, but it does chip away at your confidence. So positive feedback is good. When you find someone doing something right, encourage them, celebrate that. We often encourage care or support workers to come and support the volunteer as well, we put them to work as well if we can get away with it. We're very cheeky. We're like, do you mind just grabbing the phone or whatever else but I think that can be a really nice way for people to feel comfortable first, to bring their support worker initially, to grow, to get confidence. And also just acknowledge that there will be good and bad days. Like with everyone you manage, there's going to be good and bad days, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's really cool being human, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we've got one more question, and then I'm going to talk just a tiny little bit about the Victoria Alive project, which Julian has been on the program advisory group for. But if you have any questions for either Lana or Julian, feel free to ask them, and we'll pass them along and attempt to answer them. But we've got one more question, and then we'll throw to the program. Just talk a little bit about Victoria Alive, and the website is on the PowerPoints now. So I'll ask you first, Julian, what have you found? Why is volunteering really good for inclusion and I guess being included in society, is, maybe compared with employment or being just a member of a club or going along to a class? What is it about volunteering that has really kind of been great for you?
For me, I'm learning the same skills as I would be, as if I were being employed. But I found I can volunteer in my own pace, at my own pace and time, and it's not a 9-to-5 pressured environment with a manager who's always stressing me out. Also, I've made good friends during my time at Duke Street. I've met some of the most honest, good people through my volunteering. Managers and people I've met have validated the importance of what I'm doing, and it makes me feel like I'm doing something useful with a purpose and helping my community.
That's wonderful. I think that really sums it up quite nicely. Do you have anything to add why volunteering is so good for inclusion, Lana?
Absolutely. I think there's so many benefits to including volunteers. who live with disabilities in your organisation? Well, first off, you get to access their skills and expertise, so why wouldn't you? It's a human rights issue too. I mean, if you're closing your door to volunteer opportunities because of some sort of stigma, then you've really got to look at your own values. And I do think having people who live with disability volunteering helps to break down stigma. It's really, and misconceptions about what people can and can't do. And not only that, it makes sure that as an organisation, we are reflecting the community that we're actually servicing. So the fact that we have people who can tell us when we're doing things that are good or things that we could improve is invaluable.
And, that absolutely is. I think, including people with disability can often make you see your own processes and place a bit differently, knowing how to navigate different spaces or knowing what works and what doesn't.
Absolutely, it's invaluable.
Invaluable advice.
And you just need to be open to hearing it and having those conversations, and asking for the feedback.
Absolutely. So again, if you have any questions, I'd encourage you to type them in. I'll talk a little bit about the Victoria Alive program. So project, it has been, and on the screen you'll see a picture of Mark Glaskadine, who is also on the project advisory group with Julene, and he summed up in the quote that's on the screen really well what the program is about, which is many fantastic volunteer organisations can use a little help to be a bit more accessible and inclusive of people with disability. And I think some of what we've talked to today here is it's about, a lot of people want to be inclusive, but maybe are a little unsure of how to do the best job of being inclusive. So the Victoria Alive project, which is currently being run by Volunteering Victoria in partnership with Neighbourhood Houses Victoria, with support from the Victorian State Government, aims to equip both neighbourhood houses and volunteer involving organisations with a bit of the skills and the confidence to really support volunteers with a disability very well. So I'd urge you to check the website. If you Google victorialive.org.au. So what they've done is, first of all, undertaken a great amount of research into what some of the barriers and challenges are. Julene's obviously been talking about her personal experience, and she's been really lucky having a positive personal experience at Duke Street, but what some of the challenges can be. And so that research breaks down pretty clearly across a great spectrum of community organisations, what the challenges are, and hopefully we can start thinking about some solutions. We've been supporting volunteering organisations through community forums, and we've had a few of them, and we've been privileged enough to have Julene speak at a few of those community forums. The team's also been developing resources, so sample policies, inclusion statements, disability action plans, and if they're not already up on the website, they should be up very, very soon. And they've also just launched a social media campaign. I believe it's called We Are Able. Hashtag We Are Able. Don't forget the hashtag, Sarah. So if you go on to social media and like that, that's a really great way to get involved and see some of the great work that the team has been undertaking. So if there are no other further questions, we might say goodbye and really thank you again to Lana and Julene for sharing your stories and sharing your experience, and hopefully it's been really valuable to you on the other end of the computer screen. So thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, very much so.